All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Well Executive webcast series. I am so amped for our conversation today with the one and only Dr. Tauni Lanier, Director of Sustainability and Economic Growth and International Projects group at BDO and a member of our esteemed Governance Council. By way of Well Executive, we aim to introduce you to a new generation of leaders who see their well-being and the well-being of their people and their organizations as part and parcel to their success, and who don't view going without sleep, without time off, without self-care as a badge of honor or a sign of dedication to the job. And few leaders embody this as Tauni Lanier does. Tani, you have a truly extraordinary track record, dare I say, an intimidating CV, if there ever was one. Dr. Tauni Lanier, an investment banker who's worked in Germany, Switzerland, Singapore, the US, France, the UK. You were the first managing director of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index amongst a handful of individuals that pioneered the earliest iterations of sustainable finance and impact investing. You contributed significantly to the creation and rollout of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and that's like just to name a few. So, needless to say, you have been at the forefront of many landmark efforts in the sustainability movement, and often are a part of authoring the rules, if you will, in spaces that increasingly are becoming mainstream. At the London Summit, we got a chance to learn that you've got hot takes on menopause, pun not intended. We also got fresh reflections on your first term as a member of our governance council and got to hear some awesome stories about why you felt that as a sustainability professional, it was time to both start saying the true things and hang up that Armani suit for something that is a bit more well suiting. And so much more. So get excited. I cannot wait for today's conversation. But before we get started, let me just take one moment to thank our generous sponsor of the Well Executive platform, Daikin, leading innovation in heating, air conditioning, and ventilation technology for over 100 years, whose generous support makes this interview and the Well Executive platform possible. And with that, let's get going. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dakin, also for your support. I love it. I love that you get what I'm really impressed with you always, Rachel, is that you have this uncanny ability to bring people around like a fireside chat almost. If your mind, I can imagine your mind inside you have all these really interesting people that sit around on comfy couches.
I do. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. This notion of like building your own personal board of directors. That's your language, not mine. Thank you so much for that, for that compliment. Fireside chat, definitely my favorite format because who has time to develop a standalone keynote these days? And I have many reasons not to love panels. We could talk about that offline. But thrilled to have you here. This is our second fireside chat. The first one that we did was at the London Summit with your fellow Gov Council member, Brendan Owens. And a couple of really cool things came up during that conversation I want to hit on in today's. But first, and those on the line may also know that I like to start out with some rapid fire questions just to warm you up, warm the audience up a little bit. So, some rapid fire questions. Give us your one word or one sentence response. Okay, ready?
Ready.
All right. What is your wake up song or morning ritual?
I wake up to two little brown beady eyes looking at me, going, I think it's time for breakfast, although it's 6 a.m. when I know it's not time for breakfast. So that's something that I can't get away from. I just turn over at 6 a.m. and he's there going, hello, what are you doing?
And specifically, that's not a child, but a
It's
pet
not a
with
child.
the
It
beady
is my
eyes.
dog. It is
Okay.
my dog. In his head is exactly the same level as my mattress. So it's there. Hello, get up. I need breakfast.
It sounds very similar to my morning ritual, which begins with "Mommy, mommy, where is my mommy?" All right. Three words people might use to describe you as a boss.
Engaged, um, dynamic, and I would hope that they would think that supportive in what
Mm,
they do.
mm.
Whatever decision they take, I need to support them in that.
Yeah, amen. Favorite travel hack for fellow road warriors?
Oh, yikes. I always have a sandwich in your pocket. Always have a sandwich or something, some snack in the pocket. I'm a big snacker, so I always have something to snack on. And in the other pocket, snacking for the dog. So if the dog's with me too, he also has a snack.
Devil snacks. Love it. Advice that you would offer your younger self?
Um, don't worry about it too much.
Mm,
I think that when we're young, we tend to worry about where will I go, who will I be, where should I go. And we are a combination of not only the environment in which we sit, but also the people we meet and the experiences that we gain.
mm,
And at the end of it, you turn back and you look down this long life that you hopefully would have led, and said, it all turned out okay in the end.
I love that. Uh, Last question that you asked AI.
Well, the last question I asked
Mhm.
AI, um, I took a course in AI and sustainability, so I think it was for my coursework actually
Ooh,
at,
okay.
at Oxford. So, yeah, I have the certificate to prove it.
Okay. Very good. How about the best job title or an honorific that you've ever had?
I like director a lot because I like directing. I like to be part of a team. Because when you get above director, it's more of a from the top down, and
Mm,
I get my energy and I really get jazzed with being actually on team. So when you made that introduction, saying that I was, instrumental in doing this, I wrote down it was a group effort. It was absolutely a group effort. There's no way that I could have done it by myself. Just don't have
yeah.
that kind of energy. But there was lots of people that had lots more energy, and it was just like a perfect storm. It all came together with the right skills, the right people, the right thoughts, the right ideas to make this work. And we are where we are now. I mean, if it wasn't for those early adopters, those early risk takers, I guess, in the late '90s, that really kind of dictated the foundation that we can all pull on. Actually.
Mm. Not speedy, but I adore that reflection and I totally agree with you. We've had a bunch of chances to reflect back on the last decade at IWBI of late, celebrating a lot of anniversaries, and an opportunity to just think about how teams, groups of us pulled together to do seemingly impossible, certainly very novel things. Okay, last question, then we'll get to the meat of it. One thing that you do every day to take care of yourself.
I get a nice, amazing hug from my husband every single day. Even when I know he's slightly grumpy with me, it's I have to get a the beloved Philip hug every single day.
I read something on Instagram recently that said like you should try and hug your partner for 2 minutes a day consecutively or like kiss for 30 seconds. And we tried it and we were like, this is long. But yes, I'm all about the daily hug. Okay. A reminder to our friends in the audience, please do submit any questions that you have through the chat or the QA function. I'll try to weave them into today's conversation. And with that, let's get to the heart of the matter. So, Tani, you've been at the forefront of global sustainability conversations for decades, from Dow Jones to the UN. Oh, I forgot to issue a reminder. Please silence your phones. Very good. You're the speaker, so you got infinite pass. But that's a
No,
reminder.
no, no.
Probably do the same. All right.
I'm gonna turn off my phone.
Question for you about how you have sustained a kind of grounded quality, how you've continued to show up, even in what you've referred to as like the wilderness years when sustainability wasn't fashionable. Um, how have you sort of weathered the ups and downs, having been a part of the sustainability movement from really early days?
Um, I thought a lot about this actually today and the last couple of days, and I think it all comes down to that I have a very low boredom threshold, and if I was doing something where I knew what I was doing every single day, the same thing, and going to the office, for some people that's incredibly important to them that they know their guardrails, they know the lane in which they need to swim, and they do that, and they do it with joy and aplomb. With me, it was always looking over the edge of the plate. What are other people doing? How can I bring pieces together? And I think that's what really sustained me, especially during those very lean years when people would say, "Oh yes, Tony, let's have coffee, but don't talk to me about this ESG or sustainability or environmental things," because I knew what I can help achieve. I know that there is interest. in some of those lean years, I had to adapt my language and my vocab a bit. But for me, it was always about what else can I bring to the table that would interest even a larger universe to help being to be part of the solution, if you would. Um, so that was actually that's what sustained me. And you know, when it's really lean, you have to. I think you always have to see the light, or you know, what am I really good at?
Mm.
Gosh darn it, what am I really good at? And then
Yeah.
just stick with it. Um, you know, so I think that's probably the best. I mean, it by no means was my career and my interest linear. I mean, if you got on the road with me, there it wouldn't be like straight ahead, but
Yeah.
it'd be turning and moving and loop de loops and around like that to get where I am today. But actually, those experiences are incredibly valuable and
Yes.
bring an insight I think that some people just don't have because they didn't have this journey that I needed to go on.
Yeah, like I'm completely aligned with that. This idea that there's so much to be gained in the wandering, and in that nonlinear path. And yet when I speak to young people who are trying to decide like what they want to do with their life, they have this sense that they have to like make a choice, and that is a forever choice. And I think for me, the wandering helped me to find my way to the things that, to your point, like really interest me, that cured the boredom, that, sat at the intersection of what I'm good at and what I love to do, and that momentum can sustain.
Well, I'm also an academic. I did my PhD, and a PhD is not about being super smart. It's about being tenacious and finding a hole in a theory that needs to be filled. And sometimes those holes are incredibly tiny, sometimes they're huge. But for me, that's the approach I always took with sustainability as well. That what's this hole? What do I need to understand or know, or who do I need to talk to in order to fill that hole? If it's just not for me, but also maybe from a broader context.
Yeah.
So for me, and I think that it comes from curiosity and also this low boredom threshold. So
Yes. Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting because so much of the way that you talk about your work and your experiences is in its own way movement building, but I don't think of you as having primarily worked for organizations that considered themselves to be movement builders of sustainability, but thinking about like what are the ways to propel progress forward? What are the ways to engage more people? These are the different levers we have to pull on when we think about uh, market transformation, or when we think about change management. I want to come back to that in a moment, but let's talk about the state of sustainability today, because I'm not sure if I can figure out whether we're living through an acceleration or a deceleration. Are we gaining ground? Are we losing ground? Maybe we're taking a step back to take a step forward. On any given day, I could respond to those prompts really differently. What do you see from where you sit and where you operate, particularly thinking about the clientele of BDO, which are those like small to mid-sized organizations?
I'm very positive when it comes to the human capacity to adapt.
Yeah.
We as a species are very adaptable and probably more adaptable than any other species on the planet. And unfortunately, that can be good and that can be bad.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that there is change, but people are adapting to that change quite quickly. And I said something in 2007, 2008, and 2009 when people were like, the market's going crazy. We're not talking about sustainability. I had to adapt my language. So it wasn't about ESG. It wasn't about environment. It was about risk, upside risk, downside risk, opportunities, etc. And what I'm saying now is also there is a change. There's also new players coming in and bring their own type of language in.
Yeah.
So it's not that two or three big organizations dictate how people talk about this.
Yeah.
For instance, the UN for a very long time on the international stage was the key keeper of the language and how sustainability, ESG, and the environmental and social elements should actually be seen and through that lens. And I think that's no longer the case because people are starting to adapt and people are saying,
Yeah.
actually, some of the solutions that are coming our way don't fit for where we are. I mean, I work in international development, and I'm acutely aware every single time when I work with some of my colleagues from the global south that I am Western European, US educated. I
Mhm.
may be a woman of color, but that is who I am in that Western European American US centric area. So that listening to my colleagues who may come from Tanzania or Rwanda, some of my solutions that I would suggest are just not culturally appropriate. And I
Yeah.
need to be incredibly sensitive to that. And for me, if you're going to put together any indicator, and I think we talk about this at Well, et cetera, is that appropriateness of the indicators is
Yeah.
just as powerful as having a right one.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you may have the most beautiful one, but if nobody uses it because it doesn't work culturally, then
Right.
suddenly you lose the influence of that any information
Absolutely.
you can get out of it.
I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the biggest rewards of working at a global organization that is attempting to set international standards or international best practice is like, gosh, it's really humbling to realize how easy it is for really well-intentioned new strategies that we embed within well to fall flat in certain places across the world. I'm looking at who's logged into this webcast and seeing, Tiffany dialed in from Canada. Like even, our neighbors like in Canada have come back and told us that some of the language that we use within the standard just isn't appropriate, doesn't hit home. And we've tried very much to like neutralize our language, to make it much more universal, to make it easier to translate. But that is very much a work in progress. And that's actually one of the things that I admire about you is you don't get attached to the language, and you see it as a means to an end, a necessary means, this evolution of the way that we talk about these subjects, whether it's, impact investing, DEI, sustainability. I think a lot of us get too attached to the words. Like we feel like we've lost something when we have to walk away from them. But if you look at the trajectory of any movement over time, the vocabulary evolves, the language evolves. Do you have any guidance for those of us, and I'll count myself sometimes among them, who are battling those feelings of disappointment when you have to say goodbye to these terms or these ways of communicating that have been politicized or otherwise fallen out of favor?
Well, my one of my big bosses when I was at Dow Jones when I first started, David Moran, who was actually the CEO of Dow Jones Indexes back then. He wanted to meet me. We had a coffee. We sat down, and here's a Harvard-educated lawyer who um, took every word. You could see him taking every word, and he'd roll it around in his mouth before he would speak it. He was incredibly conscious and in the moment with his language. He was a lawyer. I mean, that is actually his craft. But what he told me very early is, don't politicize the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. Don't make it political, because what we are trying to do, we needed to focus on is what is the outcome. And I have carried that with me. So when I don't get attached to the language, and I think that AI can actually help if we understand what are we trying to get to, what is the ultimate positive plus goal of this. And if we have to move backwards from that, let's do it. And if we need to change the language along the way, let's do it. But the goal needs to be kept in mind. A lot of people do talk about planetary boundaries, for instance, is their goal. Brilliant. Blue economy, using things in a very structured and systematic way is another goal. But if you keep your goal in mind and figure out how you can get there,
Right.
that's always been me. So I've never been wedded to the language. I've been wedded to the outcome. What is it that I want to achieve?
I love that. Don't be wedded to the language, be wedded to the outcome. Um, you mentioned you're a woman of color. You've spent probably the bulk of your career, that's safe to say, in a
I've been my
male-dominated
whole life a woman of
industry.
color, actually, Rachel.
Yes, yes, you were born a woman of color. You exist as a woman of color. Uh, but you've spent most of your career in an industry where people don't look like you. Um, and and you, as and this I think holds for many women in a similar position, have described that like your armor has been what you refer to as your ironclad bona fides. An investment, Dr. Lanier, an investment banker, a PhD with a postdoc. But when you started in sustainability, and again, these are your words, it was all self-knitted sweaters and Birkenstocks with socks, but you donned the Armani suit. Um, Now there's a generation of leaders who have the credentials, the rock solid credentials. They're also rocking the suits, but you've hung your suit up. I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking a little bit more polished today than I've seen you on other calls. You dressed the part, but generally speaking, like you said you gave those suits away. Why? What was the shift?
The shift actually happened to me quite early in my career, giving away my suits. It was because I didn't need that armor, if you would, to make my point. I had gone through. I mean, there's only a handful of people that have been doing what I do this long.
Yeah.
And when we all get in the same room, we all kind of look the same, kind of dressed down and et cetera. But the not only language and the ideas in which we espouse when we talk, people do listen.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. It would be. I think this time at this point in my career, I would have to do a lot of navel gazing if that was no longer the case. And you know, things are changing too, and so I'm trying to stay on top of things. I still have looking over the edge of my looking over the edge of my plate. You know, I'm writing things around how the insurance industry needs to be part of a solution, coming up with solutions. Sitting with Brendan sparked an idea with the defense industry and sustainability. You know, so I'm really looking at that. You know, getting past the yuck factor, but that there are solutions to be found wherever you look.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it wasn't a consciously hanging them up, but it was conscious. It was a conscious decision actually to say it's no longer the suits that are bringing the bona fides. It's actually what's in my head that's bringing the bona fides,
Yeah.
and then people can choose to understand and listen or not. But it's no longer the case where I'm forcing them. And now, as a menopausal woman, I'm even it's even more acute that
I mean,
this is what I have to say. You can
right.
take it or leave it. You know, I'm not the end all of any conversation of all of this, but I'd like to be part of the conversation because I
Right.
think I have something to add. So
Right.
that's where I currently sit.
What you just described, I think, is in and of itself an act of leadership. And I think what one of the things that came out in our recent conversations, another thing that I both admire you by and on some level relate to, is that you really have leveraged your otherness as an asset. Like you said, you like that it puts people on their back foot sometimes. And I said, like, I like the fact that, especially when I was younger, like I got this 2 extra minutes of the audience's attention, from the very start because they're looking at me going like, who is this little girl in the heels and why is she on stage? And so for me, it's been very helpful to like view my otherness as a superpower more than a handicap. And maybe that's not always true, but I do think it's like a very helpful and empowering framing, or at the very minimum, to be more amused than abused, by the type of attention that otherness can draw. So, talk a little bit about, that journey, that your own personal journey to really find ways to leverage your otherness as an advantage.
Um, One of the things that I used to always that always amused me to no end is that I wouldn't use a pronoun, so it wasn't a Miss or Mrs. Uh, Lanier. It's always doctor. And there would be a number of people that hadn't done their homework. And then I would show up for a meeting and they'd say, come out and look, where's Dr. Lanier? I'm like, here I am,
Yeah.
here I am. I thought I always got a little bit of a chuckle out of that because I can't take it as a bad thing. I just recognize for what it is.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm not going to take on other people's challenges, whether they be social or whatever, but I'm around because I want to talk about how can we find solutions together. And if that's
Yeah.
part of the calculus that they bring to the table, fine. It's either we work around it or we include it in a solution. Because I like solutions. I like to say at the end of the day, I've done this. I've been part of this. I've been part of this project that was either influential or inspired solutions or inspired figuring out how to deal with challenges going forward.
Yeah.
I guess from a personal point of view, I think I'm not so much. I've always been a rule follower. So I always tried to change things from within. I was never going to be the person that was, as an environmentalist, wrapping myself around the tree or anything like that. That was never going to be me. It was always going to be from the inside. So I had to be seen as an insider, thus the suits, and then
Mm,
talk a
mm,
different language. My best friend,
mm.
my best friend, her father was the CEO of a savings and loan bank in New York, and we've been friends for 40 years. And he was really funny that he'd say, "What is the sustainability? What is the environmental thing that you're learning at university? Nobody's going to ever want that."
Yeah.
And lo and behold, people do want that now.
Look at you now.
But I knew that I needed to be work within the system in order
Yeah.
to change it, not work from outside. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my superpower, is trying to be inside, changing hearts and minds around the water cooler, than
Mm,
somebody from outside trying to break down the defenses. Because I'm no good at that. I'm
mm,
just not good at
mm,
it. I'm your backroom boffin, and I say, well, have you thought about it this way? Which I think is a lot more supportive than trying to say you should be doing this.
mm.
No, I'm who am I to say what exactly people should be doing?
It's so fascinating for me to hear you describe yourself as a rule follower because my perception of you is someone who, often your contributions are disruptive, they're evocative, and intentionally so. In fact, I'm pretty sure that was one of the things that drew me to you in the first place. Like you were saying all the true things in the room that nobody else was saying and just cutting straight to the heart of the matter. And that, the fact that you take it upon yourself to say the true things, even if they're unpopular, even if they could make you unpopular. Um, Maybe it comes with experience, wisdom, age. Maybe it's because you're going through menopause, like you said, and you just don't care. But I love that you are unafraid to call it like you see it, and even more that you see that almost like as a gift that you pay forward. Talk a little bit about that. Like how is saying the true things um, giving others a platform for finding their own voice?
Well, you have to know the rules in order to break them. You have to know the rules in order to figure out where are the softer edges, where are the holes, where are the gaps that need filling. Because without understanding the rules, then what happens is you can get people's backs up very, very quickly, and that just happens sometimes just because the pure nature of what I look like. Sometimes people get their backs up. That's not something I can actually control, and it's not something I actually worry about. But looking at the rules and trying to figure out how can we enhance it, etc.
Hmm.
So that's my approach. Actually to that. This is an evolving field.
Yeah.
And I always tell people that it's not like accounting that has their standards and this is how accounting should be. And they've been doing it for 150 years the exact same way. Sustainability, ESG, environmental, DEI, social justice, etc. It's evolving and it continues to evolve. And unless we who are part of it starts to take it apart and build it up again, it's not going to actually get any better.
Mhm.
And it demands us to continue to improve and to enhance what we already know. And I think, I mean, that's one of the things I talk about when moving from the Millennium Development Goals to the Sustainable Development Goals. Is that the minute it was identified in the Millennium Development Goals what kind of international and world challenges we're looking at. The Sustainable Development Goals has fine tuned that. What's going to happen after the SDGs? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not quite sure I'll be part of that discussion, but I'm confident that people would have learned, this adaptation, this learning pathway to get to the next level. So the 2.0, the 3.0, the 4.0, and
Mm.
enhancing and
Mm.
making it better.
It is incredible the SDGs, the power that they have had, and especially the influence on corporate goals and corporate even reporting, because they really weren't designed for that, right? They were
Yeah.
designed, for
Member states.
yeah. Do you look back and view that work around the SDGs as your hallmark contribution to the sustainability movement thus far? Like if you had to name your pinnacle achievement to date, would that be it?
I'm still kind of looking forward to my pinnacle achievement. I don't think
Okay,
I've actually
fair.
moved on yet, but the UN
So far.
SDGs so far, I think the UN SDGs for me is a North Star, is one of the objectives, and the mere fact that they work together and separately is inspired.
Yeah.
I'm working a lot on SDG number 16, which is about access to international to institutions.
Mm.
So I don't know if your audience know this, but there is a vast percentage of the population in the United States, or not in the United States, but in the world, that don't have birth certificates. So they are non-citizens. They do not have access to
Wow.
social support at all because they have no birth certificates. Either they couldn't afford one, or that's
Yep.
not a possibility for them, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that's not something that I would recognize because my drawer right here, I have two passports. I have my driver's license, et cetera, which so I can prove that I'm part of this citizenship. But there's a number of the population of the world that they can't look to
Mm.
that. So the
Mm.
UN SDGs for me has identified challenges in the world that some I can help, sometimes I can influence, sometimes I can support, and trying to find solutions. And my bag that I bring, my bailiwick, if you would, is around finance. So how can we finance solutions? How can we finance support ideas and projects?
Mm.
And the beauty about the financial markets is they're just not homogeneous. There's a variety of different products. There's a variety of different ways of going about it. But if you keep, what is it that you want to address? What do you want to achieve? Finance is one of the bigger levers that you can have.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's why I focused actually on sustainable finance.
Yeah, I think the SDGs, like you're saying, have given everyone a sense of what their contributions can be. Like just even thinking about the visual and the way that it's laid out, people tend to identify themselves by the SDGs that they're most directly supporting. Same thing with organizations. The thing I think is most profound about the SDGs is that it's really the first global framework, mainstream or borderline mainstream anyway, that I can think of that like really effortlessly and gracefully merged what I think the connotation that most people have of sustainability, or rather the denotation of sustainability, like sustainability is about the planet, it's about, the health of ecosystems, et cetera, with the notion of social sustainability. So eliminating poverty, rights for women and girls, enhancing health and well-being that in some ways feels like it empowers organizations like IWBI to have a seat at that table, like to be able to define ourselves as contributors to the sustainability movement. So from that perspective, I would say thank you. Like I think that the
Exactly.
SDGs have had an outsized impact
Yeah.
on the work that we do and contextualizing it in the bigger picture.
Well, the challenges are universal because if you look at education, to teach a child to read in South Philadelphia is exactly the same as in Kigali. There's no difference. You know, so recognizing that there are universal challenges that everyone
Mhm.
has to deal with
Mm.
is powerful. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of a believer of the seventh generation, and I'm not entirely sure. We talked about this actually. The seventh generation, that I live my life for the seventh generation. So my great grandparents were the first generations. My grandparents are the second generation. My parents were the third generation. I'm the fourth. My children would be the fifth. Their children are the sixth, and their children are the seventh. So I live in such a way that the quality of life that I have, the seventh
Yeah.
generation can also have. We're
Mm.
not talking about technology, innovation technology. We're not talking about anything, but access to the same type of things that I have, which is
Yeah.
education, clean air, the
Yeah.
the ability to be productive, to be able to love the person I want. All those
Yeah.
things are so important and ingrained within me that I live consciously every day to make sure that the seventh generation have those exact same skills or
Mm.
ability and opportunities that I have.
I just got chills. I really love that framing, especially as a mom. It's never been lost on me, but especially not when we were thinking about starting a family, that it wasn't a guarantee that my future child would enjoy the basic luxuries that I had enjoyed growing up, like you're saying, air that's safe to breathe, a democracy that is stable, the um, uh, ability to love who you love. Like these are things that have been, hard won. They're also things that in many different places around the world are have never been on offer, or are immediately under threat. So I just love that framing, and that pay it forward mentality. Like who am I paving the way for, and what kind of life do I aspire that they can lead? You mentioned you're someone who's always worked from the inside out. Um, and so you don't like work at a sustainability focused organization per se, and you haven't. You've worked like in investment banks, for instance, you've worked within global consulting businesses. What would you offer to other sustainability leaders who are working in organizations or in professional fields that maybe aren't aligned with their values or priorities? Like, to be the lone sustainability champion or something close to it, which I know you've lived through many times over. What's your advice?
I've learned something the last few weeks insofar as looking at sustainability and then the defense industry. I met a very interesting man not too long ago who was the ethics and sustainability person at BAE Systems, which is the biggest provider of the defense industry here in the UK. I mean, they build warships. That's
Mm-hmm.
what they do, and weapons. And I asked him how did he get by with the ethics side of things and also being the sustainability side of things and working at BAE Systems. And he said, humans unfortunately are create war and have war. But how can we have war that doesn't everyone? It just impacts just those people that are seen as your enemies. So there's the collateral damage. How can we reduce the collateral damage by making better weapons of war?
Mm-hmm.
Which, in a sustainability point of view, I just find it, one's over here and then one's over here. I'm not really trying to find the middle, but what I am getting my teeth into is that I think the defense industry, and we all can actually agree that the defense industry has brought really massive progress to medical, whether it's prosthetics or wound care, etc. All those things have actually been focused and fine tuned in the theater of war.
Mm-hmm.
But now, given the how war is actually chased right now, it's data heavy. It's looking at drones, etc. And what's needed is you need mobile energy generation, and that is completely separate from a grid. There's more people that die on fuel convoys than anything else in war. So the
Yeah.
defense industry is looking at using renewable energy, mobile renewable energy that could be used in the civil society. So who knows, in 10 years' time, in your garden, you might have a small shed that generates all the energy that your family needs. And that
Mm-hmm.
came directly from the theater of war. So
Mm.
it's splitting, for some people it's splitting hairs, but for me
Yeah.
it's trying to, once again, looking over the edge of the plate, trying to figure out where are there values and positive things that I can take out of, which is for me arguably a terrible thing,
Yep.
but something that if it was up to me, there'd be no war. Unfortunately, there are. How can we get something good out of it that will actually support the rest of us?
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so those
Yeah.
are the kind of things that I kind of look at. And speaking to this man, I mean that he was, he was. It was incredible just to have that conversation with him because I'm like, to me, how does that even start? And
Right.
he walked me very cautiously, held my hand about how he went about doing it. And this is somebody that's been doing it for almost as long as I have. To hear his rationale, I found it interesting. I'm still getting my head around it, so I'm writing things
Yeah.
around it. But it challenges me once again. And sustainability
Mm.
for me should always challenge me. I should always be challenged
Yeah.
by the minute that I sit on my laurels,
Yeah.
I'm going to go and start a garden. So
This is another thing that I think you do so well is you like find these really meaningful connections between seemingly disconnected things or ideas and use that as a means to bridge with co-collaborators. I want to switch gears a little bit and edge into the topic of inclusive design, but maybe in a slightly unexpected way. So we've been teasing this menopause headline, and there's a reason for it. So when we did the fireside chat in London, I would go so far as to say that you brought down the house. Like you had people absolutely in stitches. Many people approached me to say that it was their favorite session of the day. But many people, particularly women, approached you afterwards, but for an entirely different reason. Do you want to, yeah, tell the story? Let's start there.
So we were just talking about some of the challenges around the built environment and being comfortable in where you work. And for me, it was a throwaway line about saying, I'm a menopausal woman, so I look at these things differently. And it's not something that I focus on being menopausal. I am menopausal. It's just one of those things. It's just part of me now. But so many women came up to me afterwards, and I was that for me it was quite surprising how many women said, "We don't talk about this in our country," or "Thank you very much for bringing it up. Thank you for at least putting it out there in the open." When I wasn't trying to be an advocate for it, I think I probably would have done a worse job of it if I tried to be more of taking that advocate role. It was more or less to say, "This is who I am. I'm still a working person. I feel like I still can bring value." But my world within this body that I have is also changing. And I
Mm,
have to understand how these changes actually help me do my job better or do my job differently.
mm.
And for me, it's differently. I have to look at how I do my job differently just because I'm menopausal. So it was a throwaway line, but it ended up being actually quite started
Far
me
from
to think
throwaway.
about how menopause should be part of the whole calculus of what you guys do at well as well.
And it is. I mean, we've done, I think, some really good work with the community around various elements of inclusive design. But that whole interaction that played out in London made me think about another opportunity to dimensionalize some of our work. I had mentioned to you when we were prepping for this, yeah, we have a number of different provisions that I think would be really supportive of menopausal women in the workplace. Things like, incentives for personal heating and cooling devices, or, support for flexible dress code, or strategies to help you control thermal conditions in the bedroom at night within our residential standard. You very adeptly, like very politely, reminded me that menopause is about more than just hot flashes. And in fact, that doesn't sit on your list of symptoms. And so I've just been thinking a lot about, like, what are those other opportunities that we have to create a more supportive environment via well for multi-generational workforces. So I'm wondering if you have any other advice, or you could, like, think about a symptom and then track your way to a potential intervention.
Well, one of my symptoms is actually I have very bad joints. I get very bad joint pain. So having the ability to stand and to sit when I need to, also to change chairs when I need to,
Yeah.
and also to be able to make small walks around, not tall walks, or if I have to go with stairs everywhere. I mean, that's also quite challenging.
Mm,
Um, so, and you're right. I mean, not every woman experiences menopause as every one of the other ones. I have a very good friend, and she has no symptoms whatsoever, which I find quite infuriating. But it's just I don't have hot flashes. But what I can do is, if it empowers me to put the environment that works best for me,
yeah.
that's incredibly powerful. So
Yeah.
whether it's how chairs move, you know. How desks move, etc., can be very helpful.
Yeah.
And I suffer a lot from tinnitus actually after from menopause. So too quiet is not great, but also too loud's not great. So
Right.
somewhere in the middle, finding a space that's somewhere in the middle, so I
Right.
don't focus on the ringing in my ears and I can focus on my work, for instance.
Interesting. Like, as you're saying all those things, I'm going, yeah, we do have a feature for, sit stand desks and
Yeah.
ergonomic chairs, and, choice in workspaces and environments that aren't too quiet or too loud. I'm like, oh yeah, check, check, check. Um, but I also think, just reflecting on that moment, like, one of the other things that was just so powerful about it is um, that speaking on taboo topics is in and of itself a strategy for destigmatizing conversations, particularly in the workplace. So, like, I can see a real parallel with something like mental health, for instance. Just the more that we talk about these things, the more comfortable others feel. So I think that's exactly what happened in London. Um, you are one of our newest members of the Governance Council, and unlike many members of our Governance Council, you don't work in design. So what's your hot take? Like, what's it been? First of all, why did you say yes? You're a really busy lady. Um, and what is one thing that's really, made an impression on you or that you've learned during that time?
Why? Because you hassled me. No, actually, you were
True.
quite good in telling me this is what we need. You're quite good at figuring out this is the landscape I have. What's kind of missing, and what kind of skills can I like slot in?
Mhm.
And I think that I just happened to show up at that point of time when you recognize that there's definitely a gap here. That somebody who doesn't come from design, comes from a
Mhm.
sustainable finance point of view with a very broad experience, can kind of fill that niche.
Yep.
What I'm finding is that I'm learning a lot from my colleagues, on
Mhm.
which is quite important for me. I'm always trying to learn, but it helps me be at the edge of the plate too. Is saying thinking about, okay, I can think about things a little bit differently than I would have just by listening to my colleagues talk about how they go about this. And I mean, you have some great people on your team. I'm thinking Anna Marie and Giovanna, most notably, who I know the best. And these are women that have such a unique point of view about how they go about not only their professional life, but also how their role within the world ecosystem. Sometimes
Yeah.
that, for me, that's quite powerful, just to be able to pick up the phone or send a message saying, I've been thinking about this. What do you think? And they're
Mhm.
both very responsive and incredibly positive when they come back and give me some good
Mhm.
ideas. Sometimes I don't always take all of the ideas, so I don't
Sure.
want to you I don't want to give that impression. But looking at things differently is, I think, the power around sustainability itself as a system. You just
Yeah.
never know where a good idea is going to come from, and you never
Yeah.
know where a lever that you pull here might have an impact over there. What is it called? The butterfly effect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so sustainability, it for me is this living being. It's almost
Yeah.
like playing chess, that it's a lot
Yeah.
of players are playing it different ways. It doesn't mean that they're not playing it well. It just means they're looking at it from a completely point of view than myself. So
Mhm.
that's how I see the it's sustainability. And so coming on to the governance council, to me, is just another piece to put on my chessboard to think
Mm-hmm.
about, how will this fit? If this moves over here, how will that impact over here? Keeping my brain, hopefully, the little gray cells, uh, elastic,
Yeah.
but keeping that boredom at bay as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're using people like Gio and Anne-Marie as a sounding board. And this leads me to kind of the last theme I wanted to touch on with you, which is about mentorship. And you've said that you don't think of your mentors so much as mentors but as your personal board of directors. So talk to us about your who's on your personal board of directors and like what's the archetype that of an individual that everyone should have on their board of directors.
I can't say what the archetype that everyone should have, because the board of directors is specific. I'm talking about enterprise Tauni in
Mm,
principle,
mhm, mm,
and enterprise Tauni has a different uh, requirements and expectations of the world than an
mm.
enterprise Rachel would have, for instance.
Sure.
Right? So I can't really say who needs to be on your board of directors. But for me, it was very much about people that stretch me
Yeah.
in for my ideas. I mean, I have the likes of Gina Demonic, who was the first woman to put together a private equity fund in Switzerland, green private equity fund, who is a dear
Mm,
friend and has such depth of knowledge, and also she's incredibly funny and
mm,
really fun to be around. So
mm.
I am uh, for me, it's the first step is, who are they as a person? Could I go camping with them?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could go camping with them, to me, that's a good start. But also that they bring another viewpoint that I may not always agree with, and maybe makes me quite annoyed, but it makes me think.
Yeah.
So I have a number of those people that send them. So I was thinking about who's on my board of directors, and I would probably say the majority are women,
Mm,
and women that, and they don't are not necessarily older than me. There's some that are younger than I am, who just have this uncanny ability to make me think, and for me to step back and there's a saying in Holland is that I walk beside my shoes. So my shoes will walk, but it makes me walk beside my shoes to review of whether or not what I'm thinking still makes sense and
Right.
still
Right.
is aligned with the way that I want to live my life. So, I mean, and it goes everything from business women to women who are on the social side of things, and also a couple of men who just ask those poignant questions that think, and then so they ask us one question like, "Oh my God, where the heck did that come from?" You know.
Totally.
And so that's what I look for as somebody who stretches my mind, but also could I go camping with them, or
Well,
or have
I'm
a nice
sorry to
glass
hear
of wine. And
I've I've been pre-disqualified for your board of directors because I am no camper. N- Definitely not since I was a child. Traumatic experience in there somewhere. Um, but I do love this notion of the board of directors, if you will. And I got some powerful advice from another woman in my life at some point. She said, I just got so tired of waiting to be invited to the table, I decided to set my own. And in some ways, I
yeah,
can see that notion of the board of directors being the same thing. Like I create that community of people around me that can help me to find my way at any given point in my life. You've talked about these words of wisdom that you've gathered over the years, whether it's from your board of directors, from your supervisors, as guiding lights. And when you think about all of those gifts that you've been on the receiving end of, close us out with one of your favorites, one of your favorite um, lessons or some of the best wisdom that you've received from your board of directors.
um, for me, it's always about recognize the small successes.
Mm,
Just be mindful of those very small successes, and sometimes there's a lot of years there when my small successes would be that, oh my gosh, somebody opened the door for me, you
mhm,
know.
mhm.
So it's not so much grateful, but actually understand, just being cognizant of the small successes. So,
Yeah.
because sometimes we can get caught up in those really big things. Look at what I've done, etc., and not recognizing that, um, that there's success in almost everything that you can
Mhm.
do, and just recognize that the value you bring. So I equate success with value. What kind of value? It's not about monetary. It's about what do I bring to the table,
Yeah.
to the people that know me, or the people that just meet with me. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's like
just
it's
small successes.
your own kind of gratitude practice in a way, not letting the little victories pass you by. So powerful. Tani, thank you. This was so much fun. Time flies whenever I'm in conversation with you. So thank you again. Thanks for all the wisdom that you've shared, and thanks so much for being a part of our governance council, the Well Executive platform, including this webcast series and a forthcoming podcast series, as well as intimate executive convenings, gives you that up close and personal opportunity to meet some of the most epic leaders of our time. And now you have become familiar with Dr. Tauni Lanier. I'd like to thank Daikin once again, whose generous support makes this series and burgeoning platform possible. Cheers to the next 100 years of innovation. Before we close, please do be sure to sign up for updates through the link in the chat and follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for all the things related to Well Executive. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. And until then, we wish you well. Tani, thank you again.
Thank you to your team. Thank you.